Well, welcome once again. As you can see, this was recorded July 25th in the morning, and it is late July now. We're looking at some honeybees on my oregano that is flowered while there's a road rally outside my window where I'm doing this voice over narration. Never fails, but I'm just going to keep going. You can see the couple of honeybees there now. Like I said in my last one, they were missing in action for, all of June into early July, but finally they've come back and they're all over the place, and so they're pollinating my tomato plants, though those are in kind of suspended animation because the heat is so intense right now. The tomatoes are just, they're popping up, but they're just green. I took a couple into my kitchen, and I did have some ripen, but I've got 3 in there now that have been in there for several days, and they're barely changing. So I don't know. It's a new situation for me. But that said, we can see that there's some kale here, and I'm going to get right into the rant portion of this video. It's lockdown for many people again. It's insanity, mass insanity. We can only hope that this thing will end soon. But for many people, particularly people locked up in nursing homes or long care facilities, they've been literally prisoners. Sometimes they call it quarantine, but you quarantine the sick, you don't quarantine the healthy. It's basically house arrest for a lot of people, making people wear masks for the sake of humiliating them, perhaps, a control mechanism. I don't know. And while all this is going on, coincidentally, we seem to be in the midst of a Marxist takeover of the U.S., or an attempted one at least. Everywhere you look, it seems as if things are culminating into a growing Marxist movement in the United States. And the lack of people to understand who Mao was in the 60s, and instead these current Marxists are taking like Mao's playbook and using it in the United States, but unfortunately the school system has not taught people about how communism killed hundreds of millions of people and oppresses them and destroys their economies and people's lives, and so they don't even know who Mao is. I mean, think about it. People who are 21 were born in 1999. They barely could remember 9/11. They were infants, toddlers at that time. So to ask them to understand things like the communist takeover of China by Mao, things that led to the Vietnam War, the successful civil rights movement with Martin Luther King Jr., they have no clue who these people even are. Instead, they take people back to, things that teachers have and media are pushing on them, things that happened hundreds of years ago, which I say, if they did happen, and many of the things they did happen, so what? Get over it, I mean, let's not even talk about the old former USSR that was collapsed, when people who are now 40, or at least in their 30s, don't even remember, were hardly cognizant of the USSR, except from what they see in maybe a James Bond movie or something. And they forget about understanding World War II and Stalin. I mean, there's good old Chairman Mao, and behind him all the great communists responsible for literally hundreds of millions of deaths the world over. And it's funny, it's not funny, it's sad, but we're actually seeing that this today happen in places like Venezuela. And of course, the Chinese have concentration camps. They just took over Hong Kong. And yet in America, there are groups getting billions of dollars in funding that are actually openly admitting that they're Marxists. We had some rain here the other night. It was so bad. I've had a problem with my roof that the water was coming into my bedroom. Yeah, real tragedy. Real tragedy. I've pulled out potatoes that were in here. I still have some growing. I got about, I don't know, at least a dozen to 20, maybe 20 potatoes. Here's the remnants of some lettuce. It's a little bit out of focus. It's pretty much bolting. There's a basil in there, and of course some wildflowers I planted in here originally to attract the honeybees. Now they're not even getting the honeybees' focus is all on that wild oregano. It's not even wild oregano. It's oregano I planted, but I just let it grow wild, so it's insane. And well, there's a honeybee or something working its way over, I guess. And of course, these are my carrots, and those carrots, that's a picture actually taken of the carrots I pulled out of here already. So I'm getting some good carrots, which I'm happy for. It's the first year I really did the colored carrots thing. And of course, I've got some sunflowers, and mixed in there are 2 different corn stalks. I don't know if you can see them tell them by the leaves. I really don't have a lot of success with corn or the space to put the corn, but I always grow 1 or 2 of them just for the heck of it. And I usually end up getting a couple of ears of corn. Yeah, ride those motorcycles. So, I mean, what is this infatuation with Marxism, communism? I mean, and why is the media somehow ignoring it? That's the part I can't figure out. Or telling the truth and warning people about it. There is no, it's never worked. It just doesn't work. So, I don't know. I'm quite puzzled by the whole phenomenon. But as you can see, for those of us who are more in touch with nature, those brown things, stems that look like they're dying, that's another crop of potatoes that can be picked at any given time. And I'm sure there's well over a dozen potatoes in that somewhere down there, which I'll probably let them in there for another several weeks before I harvest them out. I might wait till I even pull the rest of those carrots out. I might wait another month on that. Potatoes are pretty good in the ground. It's good storage for them. I've never had them go bad or anything. In fact, I've already accidentally found potatoes in November or December when I was like cleaning up my beds for the winter. But a lot of growth, a lot of color, as you can see. So life is still good if you no longer live in the city. And I lived in New York City on and off for a couple of years. Lived in Philadelphia. I lived in Los Angeles on and off for a couple of years. I lived in D.C. So I know what it's like to live in a city. I've lived and worked in those places, and I'm glad I got out when I got out, because I'm living on next to nothing now. I have this abundance. I put a few seeds that cost pennies in the ground, and I've got this abundance. Fresh air produced, all this oxygen produced from being surrounded by all of this growth. Overgrowth in some cases, as you can see, the weeds growing on my little rocks that separate my raised beds. But that said, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Even having a leaky roof that I need to fix, I still wouldn't want to be living in Manhattan or L.A. When I lived in Malibu, but I also lived on Sunset, just off of Sunset Boulevard, in one of those like apartments, like Beverly Hills 90210, whatever it was, where you have the pool in the center, and it's like the apartments, split level apartments facing the pool. That was a really nice place, right off of La Cienega and Sunset Boulevard. Just as you enter into, I guess West LA, entering into West Hollywood, West Hollywood, I guess you would call it. But towards Beverly. I lived in Beverly Hills when I first moved to LA, which was weird. I just lived in it was like kind of an actor's, entertainer's flop house. It was weird. That, it was just a place that could rent by a furnished apartment. I rented by the week. It was pretty cool. This is parsley, and it has overtaken my square garden plot. In other words, there are 6 different things there, and you can see some of the sage on the right, but buried beneath this sea of parsley that's partially out of focus is basil. There was cilantro. Of course, it's way too hot for cilantro, so that bolted a while ago. And there's some thyme that, because it got covered by this parsley, it's just not happening. And again, here's more oregano that I've allowed to get out of control, and it's just bee heaven right now. It's going to be some good honey. I don't live in an area that's rural per se. I'm on the outskirts of town, but what was once a small town that was kind of incorporated into a series of small towns, all incorporated into one city, so to speak, but not really a big city, just an old industrial city that no longer has that industrial base. They've demolished about 20 houses along the street where I live. Someone told me there's 1,600 houses now up for foreclosure across the region. Back in here, there's my kale is in the foreground, but back behind that, and maybe perhaps that's a problem, I have a zucchini and a squash plant that really just nothing ever happened with them this year. Really devastating, because I really was looking forward to zucchini. In fact, I wouldn't mind, having chopped up some zucchini right now and putting it in with some sauce in a skillet, cast iron skillet with maybe some onions and all those peppers that are growing, and just making myself a little, stir fry. But that's not happening. Very disappointed. And of course, there's plenty of tomato plants all over the place. But again, as I said, they're just still green. So I don't know where we're going to from here. A lot of people are just dealing with things going on as like election year politics, and they don't really see it the way I see it, as if how strong a movement this Marxist movement is, and how many people are just oblivious to the dangers of the things they want to do. It's like, it's like the demonization of law enforcement. The idea that, what do you do if you don't have law enforcement? You get social workers to talk to gangbangers, murderers, rapists, arsonists. If these people, they're products of the education system, they're products of social workers. all the people that went to college and got these sociology and, you know, degrees and studying all of these various odd humanities type of, not even humanities, but human behavioral topics, it was all a failure because the education system has failed us. And that's why we have so many people who are just filled with discontent, hatred, and anger. And, you know, and they've come of age now. And to have, say, tens of millions of people that are not thinking straight or are not willing to see things or have an open discussion, because we have a cancel culture. You know, we don't have discussions anymore. We can't argue a fact. In other words, one side is right, the other side has to be wrong. There's no way of saying, hey, well, you know, did you ever, you know, you can't argue with the Marxists because they don't even know who Mao was. They don't really know who Stalin was. They may know a name, if maybe they know the name. I've seen people like these interviews on the street type of things where they've asked people questions like, why do we celebrate the 4th of July, or what does it commemorate? And people didn't even know what year it was. You know, which to me would be the most everyone, which you'd think everybody would say, at least say 1776. They didn't know we were rebelling against King George and the British Empire. You know, they just don't know we were gaining independence. I mean, it's amazing how little history we know. And now with this movement to destroy statues and monuments, then that history's gone. So the future generations, or what generations, people just even 5 years from now, they'll have no context, nothing where they could even have a discussion, for better or worse, you know, good or bad. That's the point of the idea, and that's exactly what Mao did. He got rid of all of the history of, you know, in China, so from the popular mindset, from, you know, and then basically just filled people's heads with this, you know, pipe dream of a revolution for the people. And then what happened? You know, well, China became, you know, there's 1.3 billion people or more in China, and probably 1 billion of them are living pretty much as slaves to the state. They have, you know, mass censorship, you know, it's crazy. Concentration camps. Well, anyway, this one is, you can see I've got a lot of overgrowth there by the fence it's just so miserably hot, and it's like that all over the country right now, that I just can't get myself to go out there. I mowed this grass right before I shot this video, but I just can't get myself to get out there and clean out weeds by these trees or against the fence and put some mulch and whatnot to just clean it up, because like I said, it's just too hot, and I don't know. There's a certain appeal right now to all this green in my yard, and I see I've got a thumb on the lens too. But as you can see here, I've allowed these vines are basically are all grapevines, and it's there's a mourning dove heading towards the bird feeder, but I've let them go up my house, and that's the back side of my house there, and they go all the way up to the 2nd floor. And I'm hoping that in that pergola that you can kind of get a little bit of a glimpse, it's completely covered. I'm hoping I'll get grapes next year. So that's about. You see, I've got there's a little bird on the bird feeder there, and there's a mourning dove on the bottom part. He's not moving, he's just got his head down in slow mo. And I guess I had my finger on the bottom of the lens. It was so bright and sunny when I was shooting this, and so hot and sticky that I guess I wasn't the glare on the lens, shooting this was just so much that I didn't even notice that I was doing this on the bottom. That's why I actually put these titles that'll come across soon across the bottom to basically hide that fact. But it's not. Sometimes there's I have like several dozen birds by that bird feeder. I feed them every day, and it's their center of activity. I've got several groups of mourning doves, blackbirds, a couple of families of cardinals, a blue jay couple that comes in maybe once a week, lots of finches, and various wild birds. It's really it's great to just hang out when the weather's not extremely hot. But look at all that growth on the house, and on both sides. So it's really fun to, just be surrounded by so much green. When, as you can see off in the distance, and even next to me, that's like a doctor's office next door. That you can see that I'm on a street that's technically a neighborhood, but the way I'm situated, I've created this in a fairly small lot. This whole really cool private little world of greenery. And I don't know why other people don't do this. I see people spending exorbitant rents in the city, people with houses that their mortgages are so high, and I'm living on less than $1,000 a month. And I mean that. That's like my mortgage, all my utilities, my expenses, and still have money to buy, a few items of, that are non-essential items, so to speak, and treat myself to this and have some beers, have a cigar. So, anyway, very disappointed in this Marxist stuff, but I'm not going to get crazy about it. I encourage you to look into it. Don't be blind to what's really happening. Get more in touch with nature. It really makes you feel better and relaxes you. And it's so easy to provide your own food, with just planting a few seeds on a little tiny house, cheap piece of land. It's relatively easy to do that. And it's enjoyable to watch these birds and nature. Even when I have a chipmunk, I put some peanuts out underneath the bird feeder too, so the chipmunk is focused on them. And they don't bother my garden at all. And even having that pond, with the birds, because they also eat insects, I don't really have a problem with insects. So I guess all in all, it's been great.